Good afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. And question one is Anne Jones.
Thank you. What is the Welsh Government doing to promote fire safety in Wales, please?
We continue to support the three Welsh fire and rescue authorities to improve fire safety. Their and our record in this area speaks for itself. Fires and fire casualties have more than halved since responsibility was devolved.
Thank you very much for that, First Minister. I attended the Ring of Fire tour by the FBU last Thursday, and they've published Sounding the Alarm, which is the future document for the future of the fire and rescue services. And I think that we should be seriously looking at what we expect our fire services to do. They're quite prepared to take budget cuts, but they still haven't got proper funding for the other instances of special service calls, such as flooding. And I think firefighters are beginning to wear a little thin when politicians from the UK government praise them for their outstanding way in which they operate at flooding instances, but then refuse to actually look at changing funding formula. Could I ask you that next time you meet with the Secretary of State for Wales, that you raise this issue on behalf of all the firefighters in Wales?
Yes, I'm aware of the Ring of Fire campaign. It was a response in the main, I believe, to the significant reduction in funding in England. I will certainly ask the Minister to take the matter up with ministers in Whitehall. This is a matter, of course, which will be of great concern to so many people. We have to, of course, accept that in Wales we have had a good record of reducing deaths from fires, and of course I commend the member herself for the sterling work she has done in ensuring that sprinklers are rolled out and even more lives saved.
Mark Isherwood.
Well, I'm sure you'd agree that policy should follow evidence. What robust evaluation of interventions that work to prevent a fire death and fire injury have been undertaken, where it's now almost 5 years since the Firebreak Wales charity called for such a robust evaluation, stating that those most at risk were due to circumstances, conditions, behaviours and lifestyle choices. And I understand the Welsh Government did announce some work earlier this year at last with the Fire and Rescue Services, but where are we up to? When will we be finding out what it's concluded and what involvement the Firebreak and the other third sector bodies played in this?
Well, we've seen a 53% reduction in the incidence of fire, a 35% reduction in fire-related casualties since responsibility was devolved in 2005. Over 90% of households across Wales have a working smoke alarm, and since 2004, the three fire and rescue services have undertaken over 500,000 home fire safety checks. The member asked what evidence there is of promoting fire safety. I offer him that evidence.
Lle Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. I ni gyd wrth gwrs yn croesawu'r ystadegau chi wedi cyfeirio atyn nhw fel rhai positif iawn, ond gai ofyn pa asesiad mae'r Llywodraeth wedi wneud o effaith unrhyw doriadau yn y maes gwasanaeth tân a'r allu'r gwasanaeth iechyd i ddygymod a'i gwaith?
Wel, mae nhw'n rhywbeth i'r awdurdodau i hunain i wneud asesiad. Byddwn ni'n erbyn wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod na wasanaethau cadarn a diogel yn eu hardaloedd nhw.
Question 2, Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on improvements to the M4?
Yes, we are carrying out a number of improvements to increase capacity and to tackle pinch points on the M4.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. You'll be aware, of course, of the controversy around the closure of Junction 41 at peak times in Port Talbot and the impact that is having on the communities in that particular area. Can I ask, I understand, of course, that the Welsh Government has given money to the local council to put some improvements in place and are monitoring that, but can I ask that you carry out a wider assessment at a very early stage of the impact on communities like Baglan and other communities in that area of the extra traffic which is being generated as a result of that closure, to see whether any further work could be funded to try to alleviate the suffering which many residents are having to put up with?
I can assure the member that we're still gathering evidence on the effect on the local transport network and the effect on local trade. Too early yet to draw any strong conclusions. There are early indications that capacity and journey times have both improved by around 10% on the motorway. You have to understand, of course, that that particular junction is well below the standard of what we would expect to see these days. It was originally A48 at one time, and there are structural issues there that are difficult to resolve, but I can assure the member that we are looking very carefully at all the evidence to make a full assessment when the time is right.
David Rees.
Well, First Minister, thank you for that information, because clearly We all agree improvements need to be made to tackle the congestion, which has an impact upon the economy and has an impact upon anyone driving on those sections. And I'm one of those people, in a sense, that suffers as a consequence. But the solutions are important. Would you agree with me that if we are looking for solutions, it must not be to the detriment of other routes, and therefore we don't create a problem by solving a problem, and that we need to make sure that roads and routes around the towns which are having the congestion on the M4 need to be reassured that they will actually be able to travel congestion-free as much as possible.
Yes, and I know the member has made many representations on behalf of his constituents about this issue. And there are some challenges that need to be resolved here, particularly access to the shopping centre and local traffic in the area, and of course the use of that particular slip road. That has to be balanced, of course, against the need to ensure that there is better traffic flow on what is an exceptionally difficult and narrow section of motorway that has been inherited over many, many years. And what is intended, of course, that the evidence that is being gathered now will inform any future decision.
Andrew Archie-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I asked you last week about the environmental impact assessment that came out in the budget announcements last week, and you directed me to wait for the statement on the Tuesday afternoon from the Finance Minister. No answers were given as to when this impact assessment was going to be undertaken for the government's preferred route around Newport. Are you in a position today to say whether that environmental impact assessment will be undertaken between now and the Assembly election 2016, or is it work that will be undertaken after 2016?
No, the intention is that that environmental impact assessment will take place before the Assembly elections. That would have to take place, of course, before any construction could begin, and the member will be aware that there will be no construction that will begin before 2016.
Rwy'n Hafioedd.
Diolch, da ni'n nodi'r cytundeb ar y gyllideb oedd yn dweud na fydd na waith adeiladu'n dechrau ar yr M4 yn ardal Casnewydd tan ar ôl yr etholiad nesau'r cynulliad bod y Gweinidog Trafnidiaeth wedi gwneud hi'n glir mis Gorffennaf. Na fydda na waith yn dechrau beth bynnag tan bryd hynny. Ond o oedi, os dyna'r gair, y gwaith adeiladu, a all y Prif Weinidog roi sicrwydd y bydd o'n cyhoeddi yn rheolaidd manylion y gwariant ar ddatblygu y llwybr D yn cynnwys y gost o frwydro yr adolygiad barnwrol a'r gwaith asesu amgylcheddol.
Wel, bydd y costau yn agored fel mae'n wir, ond beth allwn ni ddim wneud. Wrth gwrs, tra bod na trafod cytundebau, bydd ddim yn berthnasol i roi unrhyw arwydd ar y pryd hynny o faint byddai'r cost, achos y trafod bydd yn cymryd lle. Ond wrth gwrs ar ôl hynny, byddai aelodau yn gwybod beth byddai costiau popeth ynglyn â'r prosiect ei hunan.
John Griffiths.
Yes, First Minister, in terms of the M4 around Newport, would you agree that early access to borrowing powers should be available for whatever the Welsh Government concludes is the best solution to those problems and not restricted to an M4 relief road only?
Yes, I do agree with the member on that. I think greater flexibility would have been far better in terms of borrowing. We know that early access to borrowing is there solely for the improvement of the M4 and solely for the area, of course, that touches in his constituency. But I think we have moved on from the Scottish referendum, and further consideration will need to be given to loosening the restrictions on what projects can be financed through borrowing.
We now move to leaders from the party, questions to party leaders. First this afternoon, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davies.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, 2 weeks ago, I questioned you on the BMA report that was laid before members the week before that. The BMA then looked at your responses to First Minister's questions and issued a letter to Assembly members signed by 9 senior members, all chairmen and chairwomen of the various committees that make up the governance of the British Medical Association. They stand by the report, and they also make some very damning criticism of the actions of your government in that letter. You base your evidence back to the contrary on your 6 college friends, or the ones that you lodged with in Cardiff here when you first moved to Cardiff, I think was the term that you used. Who's right? Are the BMA right at the current state of the NHS in Wales requires an independent inquiry, or are your 6 college muckers right?
Oh dear, oh dear. I went to Aberystwyth, not Cardiff for a start. He knows that better than anybody. And Secondly, if he reads the transcript very, very carefully, he will find that that's not what I said. But let's return to the serious issue here, shall we? And that is the BMA are in a position, we do not agree with them when they say that the NHS is in a position of imminent meltdown. although we are more than happy, of course, to talk to them, and I know that an invitation has been issued by the Health Minister with that in mind. We are more than happy to have the BMA as a critical friend. That's important in terms of the democratic process in Wales, and there will be issues on time to time with which we don't agree with them, and this is one of those situations.
First Minister, I think we all know that you went to Aberystwyth, but it was your terminology that addressed them as your college chums.
No, it wasn't.
Yet you lodged here in Cardiff. I think if you check the record of procedure, you'll show that.
Check it yourself.
But if we look at the actual wording of the letter that was put forward by the 9 senior individuals from the BMA, the one term that jumps out, which is quite disturbing for anyone with the interest of the Welsh NHS at heart, is the heavy-handed retribution of their own management structures, talking about when clinicians raise issues of genuine concern with the management in the NHS, that they fear retribution once those points are made to them. Do you think that's the way to conduct the affairs of the NHS here in Wales, that retribution is meted out?
Of course not. And no, we accept that is the case. I mean, I'm not going to... he does need to read the transcript, but there we are. That's a side issue now. As far as the issue of complaints and whistleblowing, these are discussions that were already occurring between the BMA and the government, which is why it surprised us that this appeared in the middle of those discussions. But those discussions must continue. If there are concerns about complaints, if there are concerns about whistleblowing, of course, the discussions that have already been taking place will continue.
I think from your more measured answers today that there does seem to be an acknowledgement that the points raised by the BMA are worthy of further consideration and dialogue, and ultimately the call that they have made for an independent inquiry here in Wales to the issues and challenges that the Welsh NHS faces. Do you accept the point that they are making, and in particular the 9 signatories from the Consultants Committee of the BMA right down to the Junior Doctors and Students Committee of the BMA make, that what we need here in Wales to address these issues, whether it's in North Wales, Mid Wales or South Wales, is a country-wide independent inquiry into what's going on within the Welsh NHS?
Well, I can say that the NHS is at breaking point according to the BMA, the Royal College of Nursing and the Royal College of Midwives in England. That was a letter that was written on the 6th of October by his own party. So I think we have to accept here that the BMA, along with the other organisations, have a point to make. That point will not necessarily be agreed by government. I'm sure that the UK government doesn't agree with the letter that was sent on the 6th of October to them, an open letter by the BMA and others. I do not accept that an investigation is needed in Wales when, apparently, according to him, it's not needed in England, despite the fact he says the situation, they say the situation is exactly the same. Secondly, I do not believe that it is in the interest of Welsh patients that money should be diverted from patient care into some kind of investigation. So I know that the phrase was used, imminent meltdown, I saw it. Well, 3 weeks on, the NHS isn't in imminent meltdown. It won't be next month, or the month after that, or the month after that. Nevertheless, it's important, of course, to continue to discuss these things with the BMA, and the only appeal I would make is our door is always open. The BMA has always made its point publicly when it's felt it's needed to in the past. We have listened, we have not always agreed. That will, I'm sure, be the case in the future. But above all, it's important that discussions continue so that the points that, that are made and are strongly felt clearly by the BMA can be dealt with by government. The Health Minister and myself, of course, stand ready to continue discussions with them.
We now move to the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. It's clear that there are specific and legitimate concerns that have been raised by BMA Cymru that need to be addressed by government. Would the First Minister accept that there's a culture problem among managers in the health service in terms of respecting the role of whistleblowers who seek to speak out in order to improve services?
There's no evidence of that, but as the ongoing discussions will no doubt seek to resolve, that is something we want to explore with the BMA and others. Bear in mind, of course, with the complaints process, there has been a recent independent investigation published in July of this year, looking at that process and how it could be improved.
I welcome the fact that the First Minister at least recognises that more needs to be done on this question. As his government seeks to rebuild bridges and address the concerns that have been raised, will he give assurances today that he'll fully consider the proposals from the BMA for a comprehensive Raising Concerns Charter for the Welsh NHS?
Well, these are issues that can be discussed, of course, as part of the discussions. The only thing that we could not accept, of course, is the need for an independent investigation, and, of course, any suggestion that the NHS is at the point of imminent meltdown. There is an irony in saying that the NHS in Wales is at the point of imminent meltdown, and then saying, but there may be problems in recruiting in the future. Well, the two things are not unconnected. But these things have been said. Let's make sure that in the future that we get to the place that both the BMA and ourselves want to be, and that is, of course, an ever-strengthening Welsh Health Service.
It's vital, First Minister, that you now demonstrate your willingness to consider fully proposals from medical professions. Having had time now to fully reflect on the letter that was sent out to all Assembly members from BMA Cymru and the debate that has followed, do you now regret in any way the way that you've handled relations with the medical profession in Wales?
No, I think a comment was made that was not wise. It's a comment we disagreed with. We made that clear. We do not agree with the suggestion there should be an independent investigation. We note that other organisations are not calling for it. That is a disagreement. You can't agree with people all the time, simply because of who they are. But that has been the case in the past week. The point is now, I think ourselves, and I think that's true for the BMA as well, want to make sure we move forward now. And that means, of course, ensuring that we get to a point in the NHS where we see it strengthening ever more. Discussions have always been taking place between ourselves and the BMA, particularly with regard to complaints and whistleblowing, and we will always, of course, listen carefully and seriously to any complaints in that regard that they may have.
And finally, Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in March 2012, when I asked you to put on record your commitment to the target of getting Wales into the top 20 PISA nations by 2015, you said, yes, that is our target in 2015 and we expect to fulfil it. You said exactly the same last year when I asked you to commit yourself to that target. Could you now outline what has gone so spectacularly wrong with your education policy that you've abandoned it?
I don't think it has gone spectacularly wrong, and of course I know the Education Minister will be making a statement on this in due course later this afternoon.
The question is, First Minister, when did you change your mind? You have repeatedly committed yourself and your government in this chamber to that target. And from what I can see from your Education Minister's papers, there is now no target for 2015 Welsh PISA results. Could you outline this afternoon what exactly can parents expect from Wales's PISA results next year?
There are many things they can expect. First of all, we've been working hard with the schools involved to make sure that they take the exam seriously. That's an important thing. Secondly, we will be ensuring that students understand the importance of PISA in terms of Wales's projection to the world, even though it may not affect them personally as individuals. And, of course, Schools Challenge Cymru has been a very good scheme in terms of raising the standard in many of the schools where that standard needed to be raised. And, of course, the Pupil Deprivation Grant, which, of course, is something that she and I have discussed in the past and look forward to rolling out further in the future.
Presiding Officer, if we ever needed an example of the absolute poverty of ambition from this government, and it came last week. One of your most staunchly defended targets in this chamber you have ditched, although perhaps we shouldn't be surprised given that your own government advisor described it as plain stupid. And the response from your minister, a new ambitious target to put us in the same place in 2021 where Scotland was last year. That's hardly striving for ambition, First Minister. When can the people, children and parents of Wales expect to see a government that is aiming for excellence instead of settling for mediocrity?
I must say, and with due respect to the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, it's very difficult for her to lecture us in terms of targets and changes when one of the first things her party did in London was to abandon a core commitment with regard to tuition fees. So the ground is slightly shaky. I say it with respect, slightly shaky in that regard. Can I say that the parents of Wales are already seeing improvements? We saw the improvements in GCSE results from the summer. We expect those improvements to continue. We've seen the great strides that are being made in schools as a result of Schools Challenge Cymru, and we will be working very closely with schools and with students to make sure that they understand that PISA is important. That's a fundamental message. It isn't something it's a sideline. It's important in terms of the way that Wales projects itself in the world, despite the fact that for students themselves, of course, it doesn't affect their overall grades. That's an important message, and one we will continue to push over the next few months and years.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Jenny Rothburn.
Diolch, Llawyd. First Minister, could you tell us what progress is being made to develop the metro for South East Wales?
Yes, we recently published an update report setting out progress to date on the Metro, including actions for the next phase of delivery, and the Minister plans to update members shortly with regard to further progress.
What chance do you give that work on the Metro can start before 2016 and that at least part of it will be completed by 2020? You'll be aware of the targets that will be set by the European Commission. Would that include the possibility of creating an urban development corporation in order to streamline the process?
Well, there are a number of options that could be looked at with regard to how the Metro would be run. I can say that work is already underway on delivering improvements, such as the new station at Ebervale Town. There will be feasibility work over the next 18 months on a number of emerging interventions. There are two issues here, of course, that are outside of our control. Firstly, there needs to be an agreement on electrification, and we hope that will happen soon. And secondly, rail is not fully devolved. And that, of course, means we're not able to put in place the timetable that we want, because unlike Scotland, rail infrastructure is still a matter for Whitehall.
Graham?
I know that yesterday Professor Brian Morgan of the Cardiff Capital Advisory Board called for creation of an urban development corporation to ensure the delivery integrated transport system in South Wales. Would you think, Minister, that you would be thinking of something like the Manchester Mass Transit Authority as a model? And is this a way to really ensure delivery of an integrated transport system in South East Wales?
I think there are a number of models, including the model that the member has indicated, that we are considering. What is important, of course, that the model delivers a holistic and integrated service. That much we understand. Now we're looking at how this has been done in other parts of the UK and indeed further afield in order to look at what the most effective provision might be.
Elena Parrott?
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, connecting our most disconnected communities must surely be the most important aim for the Metro. And as you'll be aware, in the east of Cardiff, we have some of the biggest disconnected communities in Wales. It's 2 years this week since you gave a speech pledging to investigate the feasibility of opening a station in East Cardiff, perhaps in St Mellons. So when can we expect to see feasibility studies on that published?
Well, of course, we have to ensure that the issue of electrification is resolved first, and as I say, we are hopeful, and the UK government said the same thing publicly, that that will be done soon to the satisfaction of all, and of course the feasibility studies will then be able to continue. But the member is quite right to say that the people of Eastern Cardiff can often see the South Wales main line but have no real access to it. We understand that, and we know that there are communities there who would wish to have their own rail service, and that is something certainly that we are proactive in looking at.
First Minister, one of the exciting parts about the Metro proposals is the opening of new lines, but also the reopening of dormant lines. Two of those in my constituency, obviously Llantrison, where there are proposals for a new line, but we have still the Pontyclun to Tynant Baither line in operation. Is that something that will feature within the considerations of the Metro project?
In principle, yes, but of course a case would have to be made for reopening the line. I'm aware of it, and the level crossing that exists, which would need to be upgraded, we know that, but and I remember the line when it was carrying coke from there down from, I think it was Cwm Colliery, and it hasn't been used since then. But the line is still there, and where rail lines are still in situ, then of course it's easier to give consideration to reopening them, but I do stress, of course, that a full business case would have to be made.
Rosin Davies.
First Minister, I was very pleased to see the update of the Metro, especially extension at Ebervale into the town and, of course, the new station at Pye Corner. Now, if you can't achieve a positive resolution to the funding dispute with the current UK government, do you envisage that the new one coming next year will be more accommodating? And if not, would you consider using the borrowing powers in order that this scheme can become a reality?
I do thank the member for her faith that there will be a new government in London next year. Can I say that, well, ideally, we need to ensure that full control of the railways with a proper financial settlement following is devolved. I think that's the easiest way of doing it. I think we must be careful of investing too much in areas that are not within the control and the devolved control of the Assembly, because that means, of course, that it's a saving for Whitehall. And there are issues there. We do it sometimes, whether it's a proven case, but ideally we would want to see devolution, plus the finances following, that would then make it far easier to look at reopening some of the freight lines that we still have, and of course to expand the Metro in the future.
Question 4, Baron Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the current capacity of the M4, please?
Yes, I refer the member to the answer I gave to the member for question 2.
Yes, thank you, First Minister. And I'm aware of the answer that you gave subsequent to him. I just wanted to raise the point that I actually visited last Friday and stood at the roundabout and witnessed during the closure between 4 and 6 in the afternoon, the increase in traffic that goes along the A48 and the effect it's having on the local people there, in fact, quite an effect. And there is some great concern about that. And they're also sort of raising the point that this is costing £1.3 million to date. And they wonder whether you consider this to be a good investment. Particularly also, you mentioned that mitigation measures would be introduced to junctions along the nearby A48 trunk road. Can you explain that, please? In simple terms for them.
Well, this is a trial closure at the moment, of course. We are assessing all the evidence, and that will include, of course, traffic flows away from the M4. We can't get away from the fact, however, that it's an exceptionally crowded section of the road with more than one substandard junction on it, something that has been inherited over many years since the 1960s. Dealing with ensuring that there's traffic flow along the M4 whilst not increasing the burden unreasonably on people who live in the area is a balance that will have to be struck. But in order to do that, of course, we need the evidence of this closure in order to do it, and that's something we will look at very carefully.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, following on from this, I think my colleagues in South Wales West have been quite modest in explaining the situation. From the videos I've seen online, it has been creating traffic chaos in and around the Baglan area, notwithstanding people reversing their cars because they are going up the wrong way, because they don't realise that the junction is closed, because the signs are wrong quite often on those junction closures. I want to understand how you will be using not only the written observations by people to make a final decision, but how you will be using other evidence, such as these videos, such as the pictures people are taking, campaigners are taking day in, day out, because they are suffering from this current situation, First Minister.
We will look at all relevant evidence, of course, but we can't escape from the fact that it is quite common on that stretch of the road, or has been quite common, for traffic to tail back all the way to Margam, particularly on a Friday. And that is something clearly that makes it very difficult, not just for people travelling, but in terms of ensuring that investment goes beyond that section of the road. And so we are exploring ways of ensuring that traffic flows more freely on that section of road, while at the same time, of course, looking, and we have the distributor road, it's fairly newly opened past the steelworks to carry a lot of the traffic, while ensuring, of course, that local traffic is still able to flow.
William Powell.
Staying with the topic of the part-time closure of Junction 41, back in May of this year, I received a petition from a number of local residents. In fact, it ran to many thousands, promoted also by the local business community and local celebrity Captain Beanie, calling on your Minister for a change of heart on this particular issue. And in the most recent correspondence that I've received from the Minister, she indicated that it would be the plan for Traffic Wales website to capture over a number of months the evidence that's been accumulated, and we've heard it anecdotally today. First Minister, will you assure us that the Welsh Government, together with Neath Port Talbot Council, will promote this evidence gathering and that this facility is up and running to actually take this urgent matter forward?
Yes, of course. We need, of course, to ensure that the evidence is there, first of all. The only way to gather the evidence, of course, is to examine what happens with the trial closure. With regard to Captain Beanie, I believe the gentleman once stood as a candidate for this place back in 1999 in Aberafon. He received, I think, over 700 votes in doing so. So I know he is a particularly committed, if unorthodox, activist locally. And I can assure him and all those people who live around that area that, of course, we will consider all the relevant evidence before coming to a final conclusion.
Question 5, David Rees.
Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government policy on providing choices to students completing their GCSEs when wishing to pursue post-16 education?
Well, the policy is that we provide young people with the advice, guidance and information needed for them to decide for themselves what post-16 options best suit them. That's supported by Careers Wales and through the new Youth Guarantee that incorporates a web-based searchable prospectus and application process.
Well, thank you for that answer, First Minister. And I'm sure you agree with me that as young people complete their GCSEs and look forward to further study, it's important they have the opportunities to realise their full potential. Now, some would benefit from attending a sixth form, traditionally within a school environment, whilst others would benefit from more of a tertiary type education and where they have greater self-management offered for them. Now, will the Welsh Government ensure that local authorities have policies in place to ensure that that choice is available to pupils and that the choice is supported, thereby allowing every young person in Wales to follow the best pathway for them to realise their potential?
Yes, I mean, we would expect local authorities, of course, to look very carefully at any planned changes to education provision. We would expect them to follow any existing guidance, but it would be for them to decide how they would wish to move forward. Under certain circumstances, of course, there is the possibility of a referral to a minister.
Paul Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, mae'n holl bwysig fod darpariaeth addysg o 1 ar 15 yn gweithio ar y cyd gyda strategaeth Llywodraeth Cymru ar gyfer lleihau pobl sydd ddim mewn cyflogaeth addysg na fforddiant mwyn mynd ar afel a ymddieithro ymhlith pobl ifanc. Felly allwch chi ddweud wrthon ni pa gynnydd mae Llywodraeth Cymru wedi wneud wrth ddatblygu dull cyson o weithredu a defnyddio systemau cynnar ar draws Cymru mwyn nodi pobl ifanc sydd mewn perygl o ymddieithro gyda'r system addysg?
Wel, os ydych chi beth ni'n gwneud ynglyn â'r gwarant ieuenctid, ynglyn enghraifft gyda Jobs Growth Wales, sy'n sôn am hwnna salgwaith yn y siambr hyn, ag wrth gwrs y gwaith sy'n cael ei wneud gan Gyrfaoedd Cymru. Mae yna tri enghraifft fyna o beth sy'n cael ei wneud i helpu bobl ifanc, a mae yna sawl enghraifft arall.
Simon Thomas.
Llywydd, Prif Weinidog, sut ydych chi'n mynd i gynnal y fychwant o dewis ar gyfer disgyblion ar ôl 16 pan ydych chi'n torri y grant 14-19 eleni mewn blwyddyn hyd at 4.4 miliwn sy'n mynd i wneud yn anodd iawn yn ywedig mewn ardaloedd cefn gwlad i gynnal y dewis yna, a pan ydych chi'n cynnig yn y gyllideb arfaethedig toriad pellach o 6 miliwn ar 20 yn y maes yma.
Mae'r cyllideb wedi bod yn anodd dros ben am y toriadau poenus wedi goffa cael ei wneud. Mae'n rhaid i weid i'r aelod, oedd cyfle dau blaid ei fod yn rhan o drafodaethau, a penderfynodd wrth gwrs ddim i ddod yn rhan o'r trafodaethau hynny.
Dyn ni'n mynd rhan o toriadau mewn flwyddyn chwaith.
Prif Weinidog, mae ffigurau'r cyd-gyngor cymwysterau JCQ yn dangos mae allan o 36,000 o ymgeiswyr ar gyfer lefel A ag AS yn astudiaethau gwleidyddol ym Mhrydain, eleni, dim ond 737 neu 2% o'r rheini sydd yng Nghymru. Felly, allan o ffigurau dim ond un ym mhob 211 o myfyrwyr yng Nghymru sy'n astudio astudiaethau gwleidyddol i gymharu ag un ym mhob 46 yng Ngogledd Iwerddon. Dyn ni wedi gweld yn ystod referendwm yr Alban pa mor bwysig ydy'r ffaith bod yn pobl ifanc ni yn ymwybodol o wleidyddiaeth. Felly, pa gamau alle Llywodraeth Cymru i cymeryd i fynd i'r afael efo'r diffyg dealltwriaeth yma o wleidyddiaeth a'r ffaith bod nhw ddim yn astudio'r pwnc yn yn ysgolion ni?
Dwi'n meddwl cwestiwn rwydd wrth gwrs i ateb, ni gyd yn gwybod fel gwleidyddion ni hunain. Mae astudiaethau gwleidyddol yn rhywbeth weddol o newydd yn y cwricwlwm, weddol o newydd, a felly mae'n bwysig dros ben bod yn cael ei astudio fel rhywbeth fel pwnc sydd o bwys, mae hwnna'n gallu talu tamach amser. Mae Gogledd Iwerddon yn wahanol, wrth gofio hanes Gogledd Iwerddon, ond gai ofyn felly i'r Gweinidog i sgrifennu atoch chi ynglyn â'r pwynt chi wedi wneud ynglyn â'r astudiaethau gwleidyddol, a'r pwynt ehangach wnaethoch chi ynglyn â ymha ffordd ydych chi'n sicrhau bod pobl ifanc yn teimlo bod nhw'n rhan o'r system gwleidyddol. Felly os gwna i'r Gweinidog i sgrifennu ar y pwyntiau hynny, felly gobeithio gewch chi ateb.
Question 6, Andrea Sandbach.
Will the First Minister make a statement on how complaints to local health boards relating to inadequate or inappropriate care are handled?
Yes, all complaints made to local health boards must be handled in accordance with the guidance set out in Putting Things Right.
First Minister, I'm sure you're aware of the tragic case of Timothy Cowan from my region who died following inappropriate care at the Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board. The inquest was delayed by many, many months because of delays in dealing with the complaint put in by his family. It's clear that complaints to local health boards have risen in recent years, with figures from between 2009-10 and 2012-13 seeing a rise of over 40% across Wales. I appreciate that work is being done with new complaints, but what is being done to address the backlog of complaints that there are in many health boards and to ensure that other families don't go through the kind of delays that Timothy Cowan's family suffered before the inquest was actually able to be opened?
Well, we've got to make it clear that events such as that are unacceptable. That much has to be made absolutely clear. We are determined to ensuring that such a tragic loss of life is prevented in the future. How are we doing that? Well, the care bundle for people with a learning disability in a general hospital setting was launched in January of this year. It sets out the pathway to be followed when an adult with a learning disability accesses hospital care. Furthermore, a champion has been identified in each of the health boards to take the care bundle initiative forward in their area, and progress will be audited in January of 2015. She mentioned older complaints, and what she suggested was a backlog of complaints. I'm not clear that there's evidence that there is a substantial backlog in all local health boards in Wales, but should there be one, we would of course expect that backlog to be cleared in a reasonable and appropriate time.
First Minister, the complaints and whistleblowing process within the Welsh NHS are frequently issues of concern raised with me by constituents. Welsh Liberal Democrats have previously called for a dedicated whistleblowing hotline to help deal with these issues effectively and quickly. What steps is your government taking to improve the whistleblowing and complaints procedures for anybody that wants to raise concerns?
These are matters that are currently under consideration. The member will be aware, of course, of the review from July of this year that looked at this issue. And, of course, this is something that has been, as I mentioned earlier, the subject of ongoing discussions between the government and the BMA. That doesn't cover the whole of the health service, of course, but it covers one aspect of the health service. But that builds on what has already been published in July of this year.
Question 7, Alan Fred-Jones.
Diolch yn fawr. A wnaeth Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar gyllido teg I Gymru.
Mae datrys y broblem cyllido teg yn parhau I fod yn un o amcanion allweddol Llywodraeth Cymru.
Diolch yn fawr. Wel, mae gyllido teg yn golygu newid I fformula Barnett. Dy'r Prif Weinidog David Cameron ddim wedi dweud dim ar y mater. Mae Nick Clegg yn dweud nad yw ddim am ddadbwytho fformula, beth bynnag ystyr hynny. Ac mae'r weinydd eich plaid chi Ed Miliband yn dweud I fod yn barod I edrych ar y mater. Eglurder I bobl Cymru, allwch chi cyfeirio ni at nodyn, llythyr neu e-bost, lle mae Ed Miliband wedi dweud y bydd o'n gwneud iawn am y diffyg yma 300 miliwn ddech chi wedi adnabod yn y fformula.
Os gofio I, fe wedodd fe mewn cyfweliadau cyhoeddus yn y cyfryngau, a fel wrth gwrs mae'r aelod yn gwybod, fe wedi gweud sawl gwaith yn y siambr hyn a hefyd tu fas. Be sy'n bwysig I ni fel Llywodraeth yw bod yr arian am y Cymru yn hyddi yn dod I Gymru ynglyn â ymha ffordd mae hwnna'n digwydd. Dyw hwnna ddim cweit mor bwysig. Be sy'n bwysig yw bod yr arian yn dod. Ac wrth gwrs mae hwnna'n rhywbeth allwn ni ddim gweld yn parhau yn y blynyddoedd ddod.
Nick Ramsey.
Officer. First Minister, do you share my concern that the Barnett floor, which is being proposed by different people at different times as a solution to the Barnett formula, is fine in protecting the Welsh budget at a time when the economy is growing, but is not so good when the economic growth is shrinking?
That much is true. It's a start, but certainly is far from resolved. It goes far. Does not go far enough in terms of resolving the issue of fair funding. I hear what the member says, and I look forward to him and his party, of course, committing to ensuring that Wales gets the funding that it deserves.
Question 8, Susie Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, would you provide an update on the Welsh Government's plans to support those who need transport to their place of post-16 education or training?
Yes, last week's draft budget included an additional £5 million to fund a concessionary fare scheme to help more young people access education and training or enter employment, and officials are working to implement the new scheme by September of next year.
Well, thank you, First Minister. Of course, we welcome your announcement last week, but will the scheme be extended to allow learners free travel to Welsh language or faith school sixth forms? And if so, would you expect some local authorities to reverse decisions to scrap free travel for those learners?
The learner travel measure, of course, contains the law with regard to this and makes it clear what local authorities have to do in law and what they are required to do in terms of encouraging, for example, students to enter Welsh medium education. And, of course, that measure should be followed.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. Gan bod ni bellach fel Cymdeithas Prif Weinidog yn derbyn ac yn annog pobl ifanc I aros mewn addysg neu hyfforddiant neu rhyw fath o lle gwaith tan 19 o laia fel bod nhw ddim yn segur, nag yw'n briodol yn ni gyd fel awdurdodau lleol a Llywodraeth Ganolog I sicrhau bod trafnidiaeth yn agor I bobl hynny, boed hynny yn addysg Gymraeg neu pentisiaethau na addysg mewn coleg. Mae'n hynod bwysig bod hwn bellach yn nod cenedlaethol ond ydw.
Wel, dyna pam, wrth gwrs, mae gyda ni'r cynllun newydd yn ôl y cyllideb sydd yn mynd I helpu ynglyn â hwn. Ynglyn â addysg trwy'r iaith Gymraeg, mae rhaid wrth gwrs I awdurdodau lleol I ystyried y dyletswydd sydd arnyn nhw mwyn hybu addysg yn yr iaith Gymraeg. A mae rhaid nhw I sicrhau bod nhw'n deall hynny pan maen nhw'n ystyried unrhyw beth ynglyn â thrafnidiaeth i'r ysgol. Ond gweud hynny, yn fwy eang, wrth gwrs, mae'r cynllun wedi sôn amdano pan fydd hwnna'n dechrau mis Medi y flwyddyn nesaf, bydd hwnna'n rhoi cymorth I lawer o bobl ifanc mwyn cael cyflogaeth ac addysg.
Question 9, Ellen Jones.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar sefyllfa ariannol y gwasanaeth iechyd?
Mae gwasanaeth iechyd yng Nghymru, wrth gwrs, fel pob corff cyhoeddus yng Nghymru, yn gweithredu mewn hinsawdd economaidd heriol, ond wrth gwrs, bydd yr aelod yn gwybod am yr arian ychwanegol gath I ddatgan fel rhan o'r gyllideb.
Prif Weinidog Ed Miliband yn ddiweddar wedi addo cynnydd o 2.5 biliwn I gyllid yr NHS yn Lloegr ac yn ariannu hynny yn rhannol o dreth ar gwmnïau tobaco. Fe rydych chi yn cofiwch bod chi wedi bod yn feirniadol o gynnig Plaid Cymru ariannu cynnydd yn y nifer o ddoctoried ac yn yr NHS trwy dreth ar ddiodydd melys. Ydych chi nawr mewn sefyllfa I gytuno gyda Ed Miliband a Plaid Cymru fod yna le I drethu pigofion ar ddiodydd melys neu ar alcohol a hefyd tobaco mwyn sicrhau gwariant cynyddol ar yr NHS?
Na, dwi'n credu efo cyswllt. Mae'n un peth I ddweud. Mae'n un peth I ddweud chi moyn rhoi treth ar alcohol, tobaco a defnyddio'r arian hynny. Mae'n go iawn. Mae'n beth arall I ddweud bod chi moyn dod I treth ar rhywbeth a wy'n defnyddio'r un o'r treth yna I wneud rhywbeth uniongyrchol.
Iawn, dyna beth mae Ed Miliband wedi wneud.
Mae sefyllfa dal yr un peth.
2.5 miliwn ar tobacco companies.
Os chi moyn codi treth
Tobacco companies, ie.
ar ddiodydd...
Now having a conversation. Sorry,
Os chi'n codi treth ar ddiodydd ysgafn, mae rhaid I sicrhau bod bobl yn dal I ifed y diodydd hynny mwyn sicrhau bod rhaid dal I fod yna I dalu am rhywbeth blwyddyn ar ôl blwyddyn. Mae hwnna'n wir o bopeth. So felly, mae wastod yn anodd iawn I gysylltu treth mwyn rhoi'r arian yna I brosiect uniongyrchol. A mae hwnna'n dal I fod yn iawn I unrhyw beth.
The one way to suck money out of all our public services would be to follow their proposals for independence in Wales, which of course they failed to remember on many occasions. Can I just ask you, First Minister, the National Health Service benefited from some additional resource to extend the provision for veterans in the Welsh NHS, an additional £100,000, which was very welcome investment indeed in the current financial year. There's been no indication as of yet as to whether that finance will be sustained in future years. I was wondering whether you can put on record today whether that additional resource will be added to the resources which are already available on an annual basis for the Veterans NHS Wales Service in order that it can reduce the very long waiting times in some parts of Wales.
We will never let our veterans down. I've made that clear on many occasions. And veterans in Wales will not be in a position where they are in a more detrimental position than veterans elsewhere in the UK. That is a commitment that we make, and it's a commitment I'm sure that members of this chamber will share.
Question 10, Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch, Llywydd. What has been the outcome of the consultation announced in July on the decision to ban smoking in cars carrying children, please?
Yes, a 6-week public consultation was launched on the 11th of September, and it will close on the 24th of October.
Well, First Minister, you'd be aware the medical profession is united in its bid to have smoking in cars carrying children banned as soon as possible. We really need this action to take place now, because as with the ban on smacking, which is possibly the longest debate in world politics, I don't want to be talking about this issue in 12 years' time, and we need action now, please.
That is the plan.
We wait and see.
Jonathan
We wait and see.
Officer. First Minister, I just wonder what consideration has been taken into account with the consultation as regards the ban and the enforcement fixed penalty notice of £50, when one realises that if you carry a mobile phone now, it's an illegal activity and it's up to £1,000, but yet we do see drivers using mobile phones. How can you build into any future legislation something that actually means that we can police this and that we actually do once and for all prevent people smoking whilst children are present in cars?
Well, the £50 fine that is proposed is at the same level as the fine for smoking in a public vehicle. Now, of course, this is at a consultation at the moment, so this is not a final figure, of course. But that is the proposed level. We will, of course, look at any submissions that come in with regard to whether that level should be increased.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2.